Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Wednesday, September 13th, 2023, and I needed to share something I found while researching. For one, if any of you guys are into researching like I am, if you want to do more than just watch these videos and you want to start doing some research for yourself, I found this great tool that I'm playing with right now. It's called Zotero. Zotero is basically, it's an open source tool, and it allows you to take a whole bunch of PDFs and put those PDFs in there and then start word searching a stack of PDFs. I found this because basically I'm going through a chapter in my book where I'm documenting the phase from really the rise of Islam to iconoclasm, because if you know your history, the whole iconoclast controversy is all about Islam. It's because Islam's rising and taking over, and they're iconoclasts, and the Byzantines lost a whole bunch of their territory to Islam, and they need to trade with Islam. Otherwise, if they can only trade within their empire, well, they know their currency is all diluted, it's crap, and they basically don't have a large resource base, and so they need to be able to trade outside their empire. Otherwise, all their people are just going to go, they're just going to leave for Islam. And so basically it's in this era that I'm documenting, and I wanted to make a point that by this time the church is full of idolatry and Mariology, and how Christianity is viewed outside of the Roman Empire as an effeminate religion. Basically, it's a religion that's run by eunuchs, probably a fair number of closet homosexuals, and probably, they're worshiping idols of a woman. That's what they're doing. And then their Lord is this emasculated, humiliated, skinny little dude on a cross now. And it's all in all their churches. And so basically I'm making this point that religion is looked at as an effeminate religion. And there's this quote from Porphyry that I was looking for, because Porphyry actually calls that out very early on. He calls that out in the days of Origen. He's saying, basically what these eunuchs were known for doing, these so-called eunuchs, is having followings of women. And of course the women would trust them because they're celibate, right? AKA, they're, I'm sorry, fag hags, man. Like it's my gay friend. It's literally my gay friend. Like that hot girl that wants a gay friend, right? And of course these eunuchs, and this is why, like, if you read about this era, Jerome ends up getting defrocked for having basically an affair. Like, that's what it seems like. If you read everything that goes around with Jerome, he ends up being defrocked as a priest in Rome because he has an affair, or I think it's in Rome, but it's with a Roman woman. It might be in Jerusalem. And he ends up being like more like a scholar monk after that, Well, what's going on? Well, they're forcing these people to be celibate, and people like Jerome and Augustine were very much into the ladies before they became Christians. And so if you look at all of Jerome's extant writings, like 40% of his writings are letters to women, because he was obviously still into the women. And so what you have a mix of people who legitimately believe they have to be celibate because these guys were fornicators beforehand, and they feel really guilty, and then you have guys who are just gay, and they're fine with it. Okay, you probably have very few of these guys who are legitimately, like, you have probably some of them who are stoic and they're trying to grit their teeth and take cold showers and bear it, but you probably have very few of these guys who have a legitimate gift of singlehood. Okay, and that's why the church just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And of course these guys, because the probably more often the straight ones, because they're cutting themselves off from using their natural masculine energies towards good things like being fathers and husbands, they need to make a name for themselves because they're destroying any chance at a legacy they have unless they become famous as a bishop, climbing the corporate ladder basically to bishop, archbishop, yada yada, or becoming a famous scholar. And so that's what these guys are doing. And so Porphyry is calling this out way back in the middle of the 3rd century and saying, yeah, basically the bishops are whoever has the most favor with the women. He calls out Christianity. Now, am I a fan of Porphyry? No. Am I a fan of Islam? No. But they were absolutely right in their criticisms of Orthodox Catholicism. It was a men on parade, man. It was, come on, like, they're following a bunch of guys who ran around in togas all day, buggering little boys. Okay? What do you think they're going to be like a couple hundred years later? This is common sense, okay? So the reason I'm bringing up Porphyry now is because while I'm looking for this quote, I find several references to Origen that he is claiming is the Origen that we know, the Christian Origen, and he's claiming that he was originally a heathen and became a Christian later, okay? But then I look at this, and here, this is a note on, I think, Philip Schaff's Eusebius of Pamphylius, okay? So it's his translation. And he says, Porphyry means to say that Origen, this is our Origen, was originally a heathen and was afterward converted to Christianity, but this is refuted by the universal tradition of antiquity and is clearly a mistake. Eusebius, who calls it a falsehood, remarks below, okay? Well, who is Eusebius? Eusebius is the keeper of Origen's school and Origen's library. Of course he's going to call this a falsehood, okay? Now, if you compile everything we have extant on Origen from sources from his day, you got to remember, his writings were very secret. It wasn't until the days of Jerome, this is in the 5th century, this is 200 years after Origen, before the Latins even get a copy of Origen. And when they get it, you have an Origenist write a Latin copy of Origen and scrub out a bunch of the heresy that Origen has in there. And then Jerome, who by this time has inherited Origen's library, gets pissed off at this, and he goes and writes a full extant copy of Origen, and that's the one that I have. And that is the one that basically shows you, and I have the two side by side. So I have Rufinus's copy side by side with Jerome's copy. And it shows, and he erases a ton of stuff that proves that Origen was a Neoplatonist all along, okay? So the Origenists are covering this up. Then the Origenist school, you have Pamphylius and Eusebius writing 6 books in defense of Origen because Methodius in their day is finding out that Origen's a heretic, okay? So this is pre-Nicaea. This is going to be about 25 years after Origen's death. Methodius is starting to get familiar with Origen stuff because Origen's disciples are now all over. They have succeeded to the clerical offices all over the East. And these guys literally start all of the debates that lead to all of the councils. Clement's the one who starts the Mariology worship, and he's quoting from the Gnostic Epistle of James. And so you have Clement and Origen basically dominating the East for about 300 years. It's not until the 5th century that Origen gets called out as a heretic and finally denounced as a heretic, and Clement never does, even though he's an open Gnostic. Okay? So these two beeholes are literally infiltrating and infusing the church with Gnosticism. Now, these guys are going to say, well, Porphyry mentions this guy 5 times in his book, okay? I've got the complete works of Porphyry here. Let's see if I got that here. So this is Porphyry's complete works. And Porphyry is going to mention Origen a bunch of times in his works. And he's going to say, what you're going to have from the people who are translating this stuff, because a lot of these guys are going to be Christians, they're going to say, oh, that's another Origen. That's a pagan Origen, okay? So they're going to keep inserting the pagan Origen here, okay? Now let's think about this. Origen is attending Plotinus' school. This is Origen's own testimony, okay? This is what his followers say. Origen castrated himself. He was the son of a syncretist, really, a guy who was mixing, probably up there with Clement, mixing philosophy and Christianity, okay? And then he goes and studies under Clement, who is an open Gnostic. And during this time, he castrates himself. Now, the Bishop of Alexandria, Demetrius, knows he castrated himself because the word gets out. I mean, these guys have bathhouses, okay? They go poop and they go back bathe together, okay? You don't have everybody with a bathtub in their own house. You don't have everyone with a shower, okay? And so you would go to public places to bathe. And so it gets out that he's castrated pretty quick. And it gets to his bishop, And this is the testimony of Eusebius, which means it had to have come from Origen through Pamphilus, is that when Demetrius originally found out about it, he was not upset. He actually congratulated Origen on his zeal and just recommended that he continue focusing on his studies. Now, Demetrius is the one who calls out Origen for castrating himself, and at the same time calls him out as a universalist and saying that Satan can be saved. Okay? Now, the reason Demetrius does this is because Origen gives up his position as a catechist. Now, being a catechist, and I mean he's a catechetical teacher. He's essentially a teacher of basic Christianity. Okay? You don't have to be saved to be this guy. Okay? Origen literally is given this job as a teenager out of pity because his dad dies in a persecution. And Origen was trying to get himself killed in the persecution because he wanted to be like his dad, and maybe he believed himself to be born again as a kid. But eventually he castrates himself, which says there's something not right in this guy's head. First he's trying to get himself killed, then he castrates himself. Okay? You don't do that if you have a normal, reasonable brain going on here. You do that if you're the kind of person that's very prone to mental illness. Okay? And there are a lot of people who are prone to mental illness who are geniuses. They're very intelligent people, but they're prone to mental illness because they're demonically deceived. What's going on is they're demonically deceived. And a demonically deceived person is going to fall into one of these systems like Gnosticism and go, oh, that makes so much sense. And they have a brilliant mind to write robust things about falsehood and not discern the root of the falsehood. Okay? So you have Origen cutting his dad's off. You have Origen, after that, he figures out, because around the time this happens, you have Hippolytus's apostolic tradition starting to circulate. Hippolytus basically writes this after he splits with Callistus, with Pope Callistus around 213. Okay, so you have around this time that Clement leaves Alexandria and Origen takes over his school. At the same time, Hippolytus's apostolic tradition is circulating, and we have this in Arabic, we have this in Coptic, we have this in Aramaic, we have it in Greek, and we have it in Latin, which means it's spread everywhere very fast. And Hippolytus is basically the arch scholar of the church at this time. Okay, he's probably Clement is the arch scholar in the east, and Hippolytus is the arch scholar in the west. Origen is not known yet. He is becoming a famous name among the Gnostics and among certain philosophical Christians who are basically under the influence of Clement, thinking you should mix Christianity with philosophy. So Origen is kind of a prized pupil of Clement. But what happens is Origen, this work circulates, and if you read Hippolytus' apostolic tradition, it says right in it that if you've ever castrated yourself, you're outside of the church. It literally says this, okay? So this is circulating, and at the same time, Origen leaves his catechetical position and says he wants to go to study philosophy and be a master philosopher, and Demetrius knows this. So at this time, he goes to the school of Plotinus, okay? Now, Plotinus is supposedly the founder of Neoplatonism, okay? But according to Porphyry, he's not. According to Porphyry, Plotinus was one of 3 students of this guy named Ammonius, who was the founder of Neoplatonism. And one of those 3 students is Origen. And they were all sworn to secrecy as to what he really taught. Okay? This was all, these guys didn't write stuff down. This was all oral teaching. It was literally a mystery school. Okay? So this mystery school that is basically this guy Ammonius, okay? He was a Platonist. You didn't have Neoplatonists yet. You had Platonists. And Ammonius, also known as Sakis, and he says, and Origen, who lived with him for a long while and excelled among the philosophers of that period. Remember, Origen's trying to become a master philosopher. And he says, also Theodotus and Eubulis, who taught at Athens, of course, and they did write little. Origen, okay, now this is Origen. They're saying Ammonius didn't write anything, and they're saying Plotinus didn't write anything. And they're saying Origen only wrote a couple little things. One is called the Guardian Spirits, and another is on demons, okay? Now, mind you, after this, Origen's first principles starts with the idea that we're all the fallen angels, and that Adam and Eve receiving skins to cover their nakedness was not an animal skin, but it was an allegory for their actual human flesh, and that we're all fallen angels. And you have this Origen, who is only writing stuff about angels and demons. That's it. Under this Ammonius. And what they're saying is that these guys were all sworn to secrecy as to what this Ammonius really taught. And Origen was the first one to start bringing it out in public. Okay? Because this was a secret mystery school. Okay? Now, this Origen starts doing this, and he's saying flat out that this is the same Origen that he later encounters in Caesarea and says he's a crap philosopher, and he knows. He knows this guy has sold himself to the Christians. Well, apparently at the same time, there's another Ammonius running around Alexandria. And just so you get the timelines of these guys, this Ammonius Saccas lives from 175 to 482. Let's see if the dates match up. Mind you, mutual friends with Plotinus, 175 to 242. Origen, 185 to 254. Origen's literally 10 years younger than Ammonius. They both know Plotinus. They're both in Alexandria. They're both well-known philosophers. Do you really think this is a different guy? This is obvious it's the same guy. If there was another Origen floating around, and Porphyry is the most well-known anti-Christian out there at the day. He ridicules Christianity, and so you have several authors writing on him. You have Eusebius writing on him big time. But one of the things they're trying to say is the Origen that he's talking about in his writings is not the same Origen. Well, Eusebius and Pamphilus wrote 6 books in defense of Origen because people are already starting to come out and prove that Origen's a heretic, and he believes in universalism, and he believes that we're all the fallen angels. Okay? This is happening in Eusebius' own day. So obviously, if you have this other guy whose writings are coming out who are saying, yeah, that Origen was one of the founders of Neoplatonism, along with Plotinus and this other guy. Okay? And they were all taught by this Ammonius. Okay? Well, at the same time, you have this Ammonius. He says the Hellenist Platonist, self-taught philosopher from Alexandria, generally regarded as a precursor to one of his founders. And then they say later Christian writers stated that Ammonius was a Christian, but is now generally assumed that there was a different Ammonius of Alexandria who wrote biblical text. Now, mind you, Porphyry is saying, no, Ammonius of Saccas is a self-taught Platonist telling Origen, Plotinus, and others not to say what he's saying. And then you have another Ammonius of Alexandria who pops up writing on the Bible, and Origen who pops up writing in the Bible at the same time. Ammonius of Alexandria, a mysterious guy we know little about. Ammonius of Alexandria, assumed to be a Christian philosopher who lived in the 3rd century. He is possibly Ammonius Saccas, the Neoplatonist philosopher, also from Alexandria. Eusebius, who was followed by Jerome, asserted that Ammonius was born a Christian and remained faithful to Christianity his entire life. But Porphyry is saying Ammonius was the founder of Neoplatonism, and he told everybody to keep what he really believed a secret, and Origen was the first to come out with it in writing, and his first principles is totally Neoplatonic. Okay? Now, before first principles ever starts to get published, Demetrius calls out Origen in saying that he believes that Satan can be saved, which is right in his first principles. He also calls him out for castrating himself, which Eusebius says he did. Okay? Because he castrated himself, he was outside the church per Hippolytus' tradition. Now, Demetrius is not outing him from the church, but what he's saying is he can never be a clergy. Okay? And so here you have this arch scholar who is the head of the school of Alexandria, and these guys would always succeed to be the next bishop. I mean, literally, Clement would have if he didn't flee, and he was already an elder, and he would have been the next bishop if he didn't flee. And if you look at Heraclius, which is Origen's brother, he succeeds to be the bishop of Alexandria, and all the guys after that are either closely tied to that bishop through some other source, but almost always the head of the school in Alexandria, okay? It's literally like the dean of the school gets to be the next archbishop, okay? Origen has screwed himself because he cut his nuts off, and it is now common in the entire church that if you've castrated yourself, you can't join the church. But since he castrated himself after joining the church, he's basically just said, Demetrius is saying, you can't be a clergy, and he's telling people who are letting Origen speak and teach in the churches to bring him back to Alexandria. He's my catechumen. He's basically my catechist. In other words, he can teach baby Christians, but he can't ever excel beyond that because he castrated himself. Okay? And that's when Origen, after castrating himself, decides to go join Plotinus' Neoplatonic school, this is the claim, is that he joined Plotinus's Neoplatonic school, but Porphyry saying, no. He joined Ammonius's Neoplatonic school with Plotinus. And when Plotinus, this is a story he quotes, when Plotinus is actually lecturing now and starting to bring out Neoplatonism for the first time, Origen walks in the room and he blushes. And here's why. Plotinus is putting himself out there as the founder of Neoplatonism when it's actually Ammonius Saccas, who is the Ammonius of Alexandria, who's writing Christian works. What am I telling you? I'm telling you Neoplatonic Gnostics deliberately infiltrated the church. And Ammonius of Alexandria was one of them, and Origen of Alexandria was the other. And that's why you find him in encyclopedias of philosophy, because he was not a Christian. He was a philosopher. And they knew that. He castrated himself. He was a philosopher. He left the church to become a master philosopher. And then he tried to start teaching in the churches Neoplatonism. And when he got called out by Demetrius, that's when he leaves and he starts the school in Caesarea. And literally, you have him starting the school in Caesarea, and then you have his brother taking over the archbishop's seat of Alexandria. And within 75 years of this, you have the Council of Nicaea, and it's all a fight over Origen's ideas. And out of that, you have nonstop. I mean, if you read this history, go get something on the 12 councils. These guys from Alexandria would beat the crap out of people, murder people, like they would but they would pillage and plunder Alexandria. Like if you watch this movie Agora, which is all about these, Agora is about the bishop who, Theophilus, and it's like, it has some anti-Christian stuff in it, but it's not that far off from the actual history. If you watch this Agora, it's going to have two guys in it, and it's going to be Theophilus and Cyril of Alexandria. And this is like 5th century, okay? These guys are so bad. One of them is the one who gets Cyril of, what is it? So Theophilus is the one who gets John Chrysostom booted from the Episcopal See in Constantinople because he's part of this Meletian sect, which Athanasius says, we're not going to have communion with you, because he was literally just trying to... These guys were non-stop trying to pull power. They were trying to make themselves the popes all day long. In fact, you'll find them actually carrying around pope titles before you have the Roman popes doing it. And you're going to find back and forth between Alexandria and Rome, because Alexandria wants to be the head of the church. And so what happens is when Constantinople puts his own see in there, they're constantly disrupting it. They're constantly causing crap. And if Constantinople puts an Arian in there, they're going to do everything they can to slander this guy and get him removed. If they put an guy from Antioch in there, they're going to do everything they can to slander him and get him removed. Well, this movie Agora takes place in between Theophilus, who gets John Chrysostom outed, and then Cyril, who gets Nestorius outed. Now, Nestorius has been exonerated publicly, Okay? He was never a heretic. He was never a heretic. He was just against Theotokos, a.k.a. Mariology, a.k.a. Mary being changed to be a deity and called the Mother of God. So what they do is they take out the feminine Holy Spirit and then they replace her with Mary. Okay? That's what they're doing in the Greeks. And the first people to start with the Mariology was Clement, who was getting it from the Gnostic Gospel of James. And James was written by the Encratites, and the Encratites were the Gnostic sect, the Gnostic heretical sect, who was founded by Tatian the Assyrian, who also was a Neoplatonist. He was a convert of Justin Martyr's, and this guy was a Neoplatonist, and he forbid marriage. And for that, he was outed as a heretic. And so Clement and Origen are going to bring back his exact ideas, except they're going to do it subtly over a couple of generations. And next thing you know, 100 years after that, all the priests are celibate. Why? Because Neoplatonism and forced celibacy go hand in hand. Because Neoplatonics believe that you have to be celibate because only lower life forms who don't understand that they're really fallen angels are so stupid as to go create additional prisons for their other fallen angels. They're trying to get back to heaven through their wisdom. And this is what these guys would say. And these guys, Tatian, who founded the Encrates, you're going to find the original doctrines that lead to modalism and Arianism in Tatian. And then the Arianism is going to come through Origen. And then the modalism is going to come from this other guy in Asia Minor originally, and then it's going to go into Rome. Okay, so these guys are both against. Listen. They both look at God as a higher being, Jesus as a created being, and the Holy Spirit as just like this energy, like the Force, basically. They don't look at the Holy Spirit as a distinct member of the Trinity. So these guys aren't talking about the Holy Spirit. They're not talking about regeneration. And by the time you get to Origen's writings, and I defy you to search Origen's writings and find him talking about being born again or regenerated, you won't find that. You will find him very careful to use the word converted instead, because converted to a philosopher means changing philosophy schools. It does not have anything to do with being born again or reborn, because he believes you're a fallen angel to begin with. He doesn't believe you get spiritually reborn. Okay, he believes you're a fallen angel, needs to wake up to the fact that you're a fallen angel and figure out how to ascend back to heaven. And he's a universalist, okay? So this is Origen. He gets this from Tatian. And then Tatian is going to start this sect called the Encratites. And the Encratites are basically going to be Essenes, because they're all based on Stoicism. And they're going to be Neoplatonists who are out just trying to ascend back to godhood. And these guys are going to write the false Gnostic Gospel of James. And in the Gospel of James, because these guys worship celibacy, they're going to invent the doctrine of Mary's perpetual virginity. And they're literally going to come up with a story, if you read the Gospel of James, where this, I think it was like the wife of Clopas or one of these guys was Mary's birth mother, or her midwife. And what she does, it says, is that she reaches into Mary's vagina after she has the baby and proves to herself that she's still a virgin. In other words, she still has her hymen, okay? Now, she's given birth. I don't know if you know this, but a baby coming out of your vagina is a little more substantial than a penis going in, okay? And that's why this person is trying to prove. They're trying to say that Mary had no pain in her delivery. This is all myth. And then that she reached into her vagina and proved that she still had her hymen, okay? Not true, not scriptural. And then these guys are going to go on to make up myths about a couple of things. One is they're going to say that both genealogies in Matthew and Luke are both Jesus' genealogy. And you're going to have this go down through Eusebius, the Origenist, because they're going to, from there, start the idea that Mary was immaculately conceived. And so what they're going to say is that Mary had a special origin, like Jesus, and that she was a miraculous baby, and that she didn't have a human origin. So they're literally trying to deify Mary. And they're pretty much there. Okay, and so the idea of Mary's immaculate conception being specially born without sin is going to seep into the Muslims, and they're going to have the same idea, okay? And they're going to say that Mary was a perpetual virgin. They're going to say that neither one of those genealogies was Mary's. They were both Joseph's, and they're going to come up with this crazy formula that you're going to find in St. John of Damascus. And St. John of Damascus is one of the chief iconophiles. These guys are kissing and bowing down to idols. He is one of the chief Mariologists of his day, and he's gonna repeat Eusebius's bullcrap story about both genealogies in Luke and Matthew being Joseph's genealogy, and it's just this weird Levirate thing that they go back and forth and back and forth. But at the end of the day, they're trying to make a claim that two people who are separated by 14 generations is the Levirate law, and that was just the normal way of raising up seed to your brother, but somehow the closest person to you was 14 generations removed from you without a common ancestor. That's crazy. That's no way a Levirate marriage is going to happen like that. It's supposed to be your closest next of kin. There's no way they had to go 14 generations back to find the closest next of kin. Okay? Israel is not that big. So they're gonna come up with that myth. They're gonna come up with a lie that Mary's other sons are Joseph's from a previous marriage, or some of them are going to say that they are the children of the other Mary, the son of Clopas, even though it's very clear that they're called Jesus' brothers and sisters and they're with his mother. It's obvious. Mary had other kids. And then this guy, John of Damascus, is going to preach the Assumption of Mary while standing on her grave in Jerusalem. They know Mary died in Jerusalem around 50 AD, but what they're preaching is not the Assumption of Mary that we're thinking of, where Mary rose into heaven from Ephesus, which is what the Roman Catholics are going to say later, but that Mary got to go to heaven instead of having to go to purgatory, because both Tertullian and Origen are saying that you go to purgatory. Okay, they're not calling it purgatory, but Tertullian is basically saying you have to go to Sheol and work off the rest of your sins, and Origen is saying after you die, you're either reincarnated into a higher angelic state or a lower state, possibly an animal, going down to hell. Okay? And basically that people are going to remain in hell until the end, until everyone repents, and the last one to repent is going to be death, and that's how Christ defeats death at the end, because he's a universalist. Where Tertullian is going to say they both mix up hell and Gehenna, like Sheol and the lake of fire, okay? And so they both look at Sheol as like a place where Tertullian thinks Christians still go, and they have to work off their sins, and that's where your mortal and venial sins in purgatory come from, okay? So these guys, these mofos, believe these crazy false doctrines, but it's not Tertullian's errors that bother me. Tertullian was a sincere guy who was wrong on several points. He was reading Plato, but he wasn't trying to synthesize the Bible with Plato, but he was influenced by it, okay? Origen is different. Origen is definitely trying to synthesize Plato in the Bible, and so is Ammonius, okay? Now, I don't know who this guy is. I haven't read any of his writings yet. But this is mostly coming from Eusebius, who is the arch apologist for Origen in the world. And Philip Schaff is going to read this and be like, yep, that sounds good to me. No question there. The arch apologist for Origen, who was outed as a heretic, not once, but like 3 times before he gets ecumenically declared a heretic. Okay? Methodius is going to start to out him, and they get Methodius defrocked and exiled. Okay? Then Epiphanes of Salamis is going to start to call him out when he reads his stuff. What they do, this is what happens, is the Alexandrian bishop, this is Theophilus, this is the guy who's in Agora, uses this, and here's exactly what he does. He goes, okay, this anti-Origen stuff's going to start to spread, and I've got some Origenist monks that don't submit to me the way I'd like, because that's what you would do. If you didn't like what the bishop said, but you wanted to be a scholar and keep teaching, you just go to the monastery. And at the monastery, you could teach what you wanted, because the monasteries were essentially mystery cults. They were gay/celibate mystery cults. That's what the monasteries were. Okay, and so Theophilus of Alexandria. This is going to be around 385 to 412. So this is around the time of Augustine in Carthage. Theophilus of Alexandria is going to manipulate the situation. You've got basically Epiphanes of Salamis, who's this monk who speaks like 5 languages he speaks. Jerome thinks very highly of him. He speaks all the known biblical languages and all the surrounding region languages. And he comes to Jerusalem, and he meets Jerome, and he gets to go through Origen's library, and he's like, this guy's a freaking heretic. He also comes to Jerusalem and notices that they're starting to put crosses of Jesus on the wall, and he tears it down. He's like, this is not okay. Okay? Then he, what ends up happening is Theophilus of Alexandria ends up manipulating him. And what he does is he's like, oh yeah, I agree with you, Origenism is bad. And he kicks out 4 Origenist monks and runs them out of Alexandria. And so he's literally trying to have them exiled to the desert. And what they do is they go to Constantinople and they go to John Chrysostom, and they're like, hey, this guy is literally like pillaging our goods, beating the crap out of us, and chasing us out of town. Like, not him, he's got a mob. The Alexandrians have a mob who are doing this for years. The Novatianists, the empire, the official stance of the empire is they're fine to remain. They're Nicene. They just don't agree with people being able to come back in the church after denying Christ. Seems simple enough. Well, Theophilus is, Cyril, his predecessor, is going to forcefully have them kicked out of town. And I mean, they use a mob to do this. This same mob in the movie Agora, they actually do this. They destroy the temple of the Egyptian gods, and they also massacre a bunch of Jews. Okay, this same mob. And their story is always going to be, they started it, we're just defending us for the glory of God. But these guys are literally like a Muslim mob, throwing rocks and stuff, and they're awful. So what Theophilus does is he waits for these guys to be in the sanctuary, essentially, of John Chrysostom, and then he goes to Epiphanes of Salamis, and he's like, you think Origen's a heretic, and we need to get rid of these Origenists, right? And Epiphanes is like, yeah, and he's like, let's call a council to discuss this. And Epiphanes is like, okay, let's do this. And Epiphanes is an older guy, and he realizes that Theophilus is just manipulating him to get rid of his enemies. That's what he's doing. And so what he ends up doing is calling this council, and he invites all the people who don't like John Chrysostom. Well, the reason they don't like John Chrysostom is because John Chrysostom is a pretty legit guy. He comes from Alexandria, but he's from this Meletian sect, okay? And this Meletian sect was not Arian, but they didn't like the stuff that went on with Eusebius and adding homoousion and all that stuff. So they don't want to use the word homoousion. Remember, the original Nicene Creed did not have homoousion in it. The guys, Eusebius adds it at the last minute after everybody agrees to it. And then he claims, after Constantine dies, he claims it was Constantine's idea. Eusebius is a liar. Pamphilus is a liar. Everyone associated with Origen is a liar. They're non-stop propagandists. They're non-stop liars and myth makers and apologists for Origen and Clement, basically, because they're hiding the fact that they're all Gnostic. But they're hardcore Gnostic. These same guys want to force all the clergy by imperial decree to be celibate, and literally, their freaking overlord is the Pontifex Maximus of a Vestal Virgin cult. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Have them be a bunch of virgins, can't create heirs to inherit their property, and it's a state-run religion, which I am the head of. That makes money. I like that. I like that a lot. These guys know what they're doing. And so Theophilus of Alexandria is going to wait and basically use the fact that, oh, look, he is defending Origenists to get him ousted. And then immediately after he gets John Chrysostom out, he goes back to normalizing relationships with the Origenists there. Epiphanes of Salamis is pissed. He wants nothing to do with this. He knows he's been manipulated to bring this all up because he is one of the top scholars. Like, the top scholars in the Christian world at this time are Epiphanes of Salamis, Augustine in the West, Jerome in the East. Those are your top scholars. And honestly, Pelagius is actually a pretty decent scholar for his time as well. These are your main scholars that everyone's going to be fighting over. And you never have great scholars coming out of Theophilus of coming out of Alexandria because they're all following Clement and Origen. Those are their scholars. And they're all just all they're doing is they're advancing their ideas slowly, which include Mariology, That's Clement. Gnostic Mariology, that's Clement. And then Universalism and Celibacy, that is Origen. And they're advancing these ideas hardcore. And it's going to eventually all get sucked into the Roman Catholic Church, and they're going to get absorbed by Islam. And so basically their crazy mob who likes to kill and destroy and smash idols and hurt Jews and bully other Christians who won't submit to them, where do you think they're going to go? Oh, they're going to become Muslims. Yeah, these guys are not going to become the Coptic Christians who stay there and hold on to Christ for all these years. The Coptic Christians are Monophysites, and they were ousted in the next one, because what's going to happen is you're going to have one Alexandrian bishop oust Nestorius and invent monophysitism, and then the next Alexandrian bishop is going to turn on the Monophysites and sign up with the guys on Chalcedon. And so they got the Monophysites ousted, which were his mob, and this mob of Monophysites, not Theophilus, but Cyril's successor, they're literally gonna beat the Bishop of Constantinople to death. They're gonna beat the crap out of him because they've got the emperor on their side, and they're gonna go in there, and the church is gonna ecumenically try to get rid of this guy, Eutyches, who is the guy who is coming up with. He's basically the Constantinople's bishop who's pro-monophysitism, okay? And so Theophilus is going to be succeeded by Cyril, and then Cyril's going to be succeeded by this other guy, and I forget his name. Let's see, Cyril, Pillar of Faith. Cyril's a straight-up gangster. He's got a violent mob that he's throwing around wherever he wants. Oh, this is Dioscorus. Dioscorus is going to have basically this mob attack... not Eutyches, but this guy, I think Philion or whatever his name is, who they try to get to replace Eutyches, and have this guy, the crap beaten out of him exiled, and he's going to die from his wounds. Okay? Just a straight-up mob. And then they're, basically after that, they're going to call the Council of Chalcedon, which is going to be the most representing council of all the councils, because it's at this time where the Romans are starting to step in, and they're going, okay, the Alexandrians are clearly freaking out of control here. But they're not going to go back 150 years and go, dude, all these councils, we're literally on the Ecumenical Council 5, and there are dozens of other councils in between these that are based on the fights that are started in those councils, and every single one starts with an Alexandrian. Nitpicking over some word or some phrase that you're a heretic if you say it this way, and it's never a scriptural phrase, and now we're on Theotokos. And of course, the Roman Catholics are all fine with worshiping Mary because they're idolaters too. Okay? They're fine with that. In fact, the Frankish kings who are starting to rise up now are actually not, like, the Arians are not fans of this idol worship. The Franks are pagans originally, but they're a mix of Arians and pagans, and then Clovis becomes Catholic. They're not fans of this idol worship stuff. These guys are just like, you guys are literally bowing down and kissing little statues. And what these people would do is that the bishops would do this. They're going to show this in the movie Agora. This is the kind of crap they would do. If you claimed to be a Christian and you were a civil governor, they would hold like the scriptures, and they're like, are you going to bow to the word of God, and make you bow to them? Okay? And this is this thing that's going on in the East big time. I forget what the name of it is, but they would literally get the secular rulers, including the emperors, to bow down to the bishops. That's what it's all about. It's all about power. Okay? Well, this is going to advance to the popes eventually crowning Charlemagne, the new Holy Roman Emperor, and they're kingmakers by this time. Okay? But before that, Antioch was the inventor of this. All Rome is doing is just copying Antioch, and they're just better at it. And of course, Antioch's absorbed by Islam by this time. So the main people who would try to screw them over and outwit them when they would do this are gone by this time. But they've been watching Alexandria do this for 200 years. They know how the game is played by this point, okay? And they play it better than anybody, and they don't really have any real rivals except for Constantinople. And Constantinople has a manufactured apostolic succession, where they claim that Andrew started their church back in 38 AD, so 5 years after Christ died, he started their church. And then another one of the 70 was an elder, or the next bishop. And then the next bishop was Onesimus, 5 years before Paul meets him. This is just absurdly fake apostolic succession to try to make Constantinople one of the top patriarchies. Okay? And so that is the main rival of Rome, and meanwhile it's an empire that's losing all its territory to Muslims. So the Rome's gonna sit there and go with the Franks and be like, peace, we're out, and we just made an empire, which means if you bow down to us, we can make an emperor. And that's how the woman rides the beast. That's how they accomplish it. Okay, but go back to Origen. This is where it all started. Origen, according to Porphyry. Now I'm reading what the church says about Origen. I'm reading what Origen's enemies in the church say about him. I'm reading what Origen's biggest fans are saying about him. And I'm reading Porphyry. And I'm telling you, this Ammonius is the Ammonius of Alexandria who wanted his doctrines kept secret. That's what Porphyry is saying. He doesn't have any reason to lie. He hates Christianity and he's open about it, okay? So he doesn't gain anything by lying about Origen. He doesn't like Origen because he just thinks he's a bad representative of Plato. And he wants himself to be seen as the better Neoplatonist. Okay, he is a student of Plotinus as well. He knows who Origen is. He is Plotinus's most famous student. He knows who Origen is. Plotinus was a. They all lived at the same time, and Porphyry is just like 20 years younger than Origen. So he knows who these guys are. He knows how the game is played. These guys are all espousing Ammonius's secret Gnostic Neoplatonic doctrine, and Ammonius is putting himself out there as a secret Christian. And he's getting this spread all over Alexandria. Gnosticism as Christianity. And so what does Origen do? Origen tries to do the same in Jerusalem, and Demetrius calls him out. He knows that he left being a catechist to become a famous philosopher. He knows he's studying Platonism. He knows this because he had to quit. That's his bishop. Okay? And he tells him to bring him back. He can't teach in the church. And Origen, by this time, has Clement's old friends on his side. And Clement's old friends are going to say, oh, Demetrius is just jealous because the bishops at Alexandria were power players. This guy was in office for 40 years, and he was trying to amass more power and assert power over the other sees in the area because they always were. But you're going to have these guys who have Clement on their side, who's Origen's his prized pupil, and they're going to be like, no, he's just jealous. And next thing you know, you're going to have the church at Caesarea ordinate Origen, even though they know he's castrated. They know this guy can't be a clergyman. And so then they're going to start Origen's school there, and that's how Origen's going to get famous as a Christian. Now this is how he got famous as a Christian, okay? He was a Neoplatonist. He was living with a Gnostic. He literally was basically renting a room from a Gnostic woman. He had sold his dad's philosophical book collection to get some wages for himself and to basically get a living stipend, and he started going to this philosophical school. And he was living with a woman who was a Gnostic. And another guy living with him was one of the basically the Gnostic basically another teacher of Gnosticism who would come from Alexandria. So he's living with two Gnostics, and he is studying with the founders of Neoplatonism. And during this time, this guy who's a Gnostic, the official story is Origen succeeded in converting him to Christianity. That's the official story. I'm going to go with a more realistic story. He's following his teacher Ammonius, and he's just like, you know what? There's no money in selling this philosophy to the Greeks, okay? But the Christians eat it up. And they have all the money. And they like to tithe and all this stuff because this literally goes back to the Didache where these people are going, okay, these itinerant teachers and prophets, they're like high priests. And so tithe to them. Give them silver, give them clothing, give them food. And this castrated dude who has nobody's going to want to marry him, and he has basically got no job skills in the church right now. He's got all this philosophy stuff, and he tries to teach in the church, and he gets called out in it. And then what does he do? he adamantly denies that he taught universalism and taught that Satan could be redeemed. He adamantly denies it. But he waits till after Demetrius is dead to deny it. So that way Demetrius can't go get witnesses and say, no, he definitely believes this. He waits till after Demetrius is dead. Then he starts to publish his first principles, but it's not widely published. This is the inside track stuff. And that's why you only have people who know Origen or know Origen's followers who have access to first principles. And that's why you don't have it published in Latin for over about 200 years after he wrote it. Now Origen is the most famous scholar in the East. And why do you think it takes 200 years for his work to be published in Latin? You got Clement going in Latin. Tertullian's interacting with Clement. Augustine's interacting with Clement. These guys are interacting with those guys in the West. These stuff's getting translated between Greek and Latin all the time because you're literally in an empire that half speaks Latin and half speaks Greek. So you have people who are equipped to translate back and forth, well available. But they don't translate Origen. And the reason is because that's his secret inside track, Gnosticism. He didn't want that published. He wanted that to be for the people who join the mystery cult, and then they can get the real scoop. And they can get the real Origen's teaching. But meanwhile, this guy he meets, this Gnostic he meets, gives him a house, and he gives him a staff of like 14 stenographers. 14 basically stenographers and a secretary. Okay? What he's doing, and he's basically like, we're going to get you out there as a famous Christian teacher. And he has him basically giving commentary on all the books of the Bible. He's not writing it. He's just giving the commentary. And these other people are writing it and spreading it around. They're doing this systematically. And then when they do that, he is going to get himself ordained. He's going to start his school in Caesarea, and his school is not a Christian school. It's a philosophy school. And he is going to walk you through the Greek Socratic method. He's going to walk you through the Greek, essentially philosophical training. And then he's going to walk you into Platonic cosmology, and then from there walk you into Neoplatonic Christianity. So you become a Neoplatonist first, and then you claim to be a Christian. That's his methodology. That's how he gets you there. And go get your best scholars on Origen in the world. They're going to tell you what I'm saying is not false. Okay? That's his school. And so within one generation, this school has produced the majority of the most prominent pastors and theologians in the East. And within 100 years, Alexandria, who is always about amassing more power for themselves, picks a fight with one of them, Arius, which really starts over Novatianism. I covered that in another video. And they get the Council of Nicaea going. But what they never do, they're very careful to never do, because they're all Gnostics. They're all Origenist, Clementine Gnostics. What they're very careful to do is not to source anything they're saying back to Origen or Clement. They're careful not to do that. Why? Because they're all for this. This is not about anything but amassing power to them and getting more control of the church. They're not, these are cynical people. They are not about this. Now the people at Antioch are more honest. And the people at Antioch, you're going to have the bishop Eustathius of Antioch call out homoousion and say, no, that was added by Eusebius. I was there at Nicaea. We didn't agree to this. And he's going to call out Eusebius of doing it, and Eusebius is going to accuse him of being an adoptionist and a modalist, which are two different Christologies, until he gets him defrocked and exiled. Because Eusebius has the ear of the emperor now. Then the emperor is going to go switch to Arianism, and Eusebius doesn't give a crap because Origen was an Arianist, basically. He doesn't give a crap which side wins. All he cares is that Eusebius has, Caesarea has prominence, and Origen does not get outed as a heretic because he controls Origen's school and library. And so he's going to switch teams from the Nicene Creed to the teams that are over homoousion or homoios. And he's going to be like, yeah, I think we should find a reasonable middle ground, because this whole like box out Arius and like try to make anti-Arianism like the core of Christianity is not working. And he's a pragmatist because he's all about just protecting Origen's reputation. And so he's going to start dealing with these guys who are looking for homoiousion and homoion. And that's when basically he's going to fade from prominence. And so what they do somehow, not long after Nicaea, at the Council of Nicaea, they officially have Caesarea claimed one of the patriarchates. It's literally like they have Alexandria, Caesarea, Antioch, Carthage, and Rome, okay? That's because you have Cyril of Alexandria, you have Pope Callistus's basically, give me money and I'll forgive your sins people running Rome. You have the Origenist Clementine heretics in Alexandria. You have the Origenist school in Caesarea, and then in Antioch you have you do have people starting to get a Paul Samosata. They have all kinds of weird Christological issues going on, but they're actually the most balanced of the false, bishop worshipping Christians out there. And then Constantine is going to make Jerusalem an honorary see. And then he doesn't make Constantinople a see, but his descendants are going to make that a see. And then what he's going to do is when his mother's church in Jerusalem becomes prominent, the see from Caesarea is going to be transferred to Jerusalem. And so what happens is Jerome, who is a monk and scholar in Jerusalem, he is going to inherit the library after Eusebius dies. Because he's an art scholar, and Eusebius is basically the last prominent theologian scholar in Caesarea. But Eusebius is going to leave his mark because he's going to write the ecclesiastical history, the first real ecclesiastical history for the Roman Catholic faith. And in it, he's going to praise the crap out of Origen and praise the crap out of Constantine. And he's going to hide Ammonius and say, oh, there was a different Ammonius that was a Christian, but this Platonist Ammonius that's going around circulating Porphyry's writings, oh, that devil, this is probably someone else. And then he's going to hide Origen and say, oh, this Origen, the pagan who is a Neoplatonist, that's a different Origen. This Porphyry, oh boy, is he the devil. And talk about how awful Porphyry is. Okay? Porphyry is not a Christian. He's an open Neoplatonist, but Ammonius and Origen are closet Neoplatonists the whole time. The whole time. And that's why Porphyry is going to call out Origen when he meets him now as a famous Christian scholar in Caesarea. He's going to hear about him in Tyre. And he's going to go listen to him. And he's going to be like, this guy sucks at... I know who this guy is. He sucks at Plato. He was not originally a Christian. He's a pagan. And he's going to call him out in his crap. But he's not a Christian, so nobody believes him. And everyone's going to believe anything that's said against him, and he's not a Christian. Well, this is the guy who says, whoever has the favor of the women ends up being the bishop. Christianity is an effeminate religion. Whoever has the favor of the women ends up being the bishop. And if you follow the Mariology and the iconoclasm, that is true. What you end up having, you'll have an emperor, like, basically look at all this, and they're like, these Muslims are running over our territory like nobody's business, and they're smashing idols, and they're going to look at themselves and be like, we're a bunch of idol worshippers. And you have one emperor who's going to do it just out of political expediency, because the Muslims are going to refuse to accept their coinage because it has a picture of Jesus on it. And they'll be like, nope. And that's when they had the first iconoclast controversy. It's not about anything but money and business. And so they take Jesus' face off the coin. That's their reason to do it. And then they start getting rid of the idols in the churches and smashing them, because the Muslims are about to come take over and do that. And if you smash the idols before they get there, then that won't be an excuse for the Muslims to bully you and beat up on you. Okay? So they're going to do that to maintain trade with the caliphate. Then, when they do this, two major sees are going to push back against them. Guess who they are? Alexandria and Rome. Okay? By this time, you have the Romans courting Charlemagne. So what happens is basically the popes basically tell Charles Martel, who is Charlemagne's grandfather, or I'm sorry, Pepin the Short, who is Charlemagne's dad, that he can basically overthrow the king of the Merovingian Franks, who is a Catholic. Okay? He is a Catholic king, and Charles Martel wins the Battle of Tours against the Muslims. And then his son, Pepin the Short, writes to the Pope, and he says, who should really be the king of the Franks? The guy who actually has the power, or the guy who actually has the hereditary name? The legitimate king. Who should be the king? And the Pope who answers him, he has been dealing with the Arian Lombards trying to pull weight in who gets to be the Pope, and the Byzantines trying to say we need to confirm whoever's the Pope, because they still pull weight in Rome. The Roman senatorial families, they're the upper class of Rome, and even though the Lombards control most of Italy, they still have power in Rome itself and like a handful of other Italian cities. Okay, and so the popes want to get free from the power structures of the Byzantines and from the Arian Lombards in terms of influencing who gets to be the Pope. And so what do? They tell Pepin the Short, go ahead and overthrow Clovis, who is the first ever non-Arian Germanic king. He's the first ever Catholic Germanic king, okay? And they okay overthrowing him by another Catholic. Why? Because what he gives them in exchange, which they lie and say is the donation of Constantine, is for the popes to have Rome and the whole area around it as a fiefdom. And that's where you get the Vatican State from. It came from Pepin the Short. And Pepin the Short is basically like, if you as the popes okay me overthrowing the Merovingian kings, I will give you Rome. Boom. And you can make up a document that says, whatever, Constantine gave it to us 1,000 years ago. Boom. I mean, Byzantium's falling apart. The Muslims are eating it up. This is a good deal. It's good for you. It's good for me. And the popes say, I like that sauce. I like that sauce. I'm going to spread it on everything. Okay? And they do. Okay? And so then, after Pepin the Short, his son Charlemagne gets involved, and these guys have their little warring disputes and civil wars and crap over this. You're going to have Pope Leo III. And Pope Leo III gets elected as Pope. And the Romans don't like it. The pro-Byzantines don't like it. Who are the family of the guy that came before him. They don't like this. And these guys were also the guys who pushed back against iconoclasm. Okay? This is going to be Leo. This is going to be the same guy who basically tells you, when the Byzantine empires say, we need to smash all these idols that we're losing, and you're literally starting to get Byzantine empires now who are systematically losing battles, and you're going to get this guy named Michael II. Or I'm sorry, you're going to get this guy named, it's either Constantine IV or Michael II, but it's going to be an Armenian Byzantine emperor, because these different generals would become the emperor. Constantine's line's been broken for a long time, and basically these, they're called themes, but they're basically legions. Basically, these generals of these sections of the army eventually take turns taking over the throne after this. And this guy is legitimately going to look at things and look at history, and he's going to be like, every emperor who is pro, they call iconodules, which is basically these guys who kiss idols and bow down to them. Literally, you've got these guys kissing idols, bowing down to them, prostrating themselves to them. And there's this other thing that goes on, and I forget what it's called. It's called like prostocarusis or something like this, where the bishop would come in with a picture of Mary or a picture of Jesus, and you were supposed to lay down on the floor, even if you were the emperor. Like, totally prostrate yourself to it. Well, the guys who are doing this are all dying in either civil riots or losing in war and dying. Okay? And all the ones who don't, the iconoclasts, are dying of old age in their beds. But when they die of old age, their wives reinstitute the idols. This is happening for multiple generations in the 7th and 8th century. Okay? So these guys are literally looking at this and like, we need to stop worshiping idols. The Muslims don't even follow Jesus, but they're not worshiping idols, and they're winning. And every time we have an emperor who's worshiping idols, we'll call it what does they call it? Adoring icons, which is just a synonym for worshiping idols. Okay? Everybody who does this ends up dying in a riot or a battle, while the guys who don't end up dying in their beds of old age. We need to stop this. And what's going to happen is the last ecumenical council is going to be basically the Bishop of Constantinople, who was originally an iconoclast, is going to get together with the Bishop of Rome, who now has the Constantine in his pocket. And these guys are going to say, let's have an ecumenical council that says, once and for all, idols are okay. That's what they're going to do. And even though you have all the ancient church fathering saying, don't worship idols, don't make icons, don't get people starting to bow down to them, they know these guys they're already trying to get to these guys to pray to the saints and adore the saints. And what you have is these post-pagans, who are all being forced to be Christians anyways, are putting food on their gravestones, like pagans do all over the world. They're putting food on their gravestones because Tertullian is telling them that their soul is corporeal, because that guy who is hungering and thirsting in Sheol with Lazarus is literally hungering and thirsting, and if you put food on their graves, you're going to feed them. And these people are going to be like, hey, that pretty much matches their paganism. And next thing you know, you're going to have a hierarchy of saints to worship instead of your pagan gods. And instead of having a bunch of ancestors that you worship and turn into local pagan gods in a hierarchy under the prevailing imperial gods, you're going to have a bunch of martyrs that you worship and pay homage to and pray to and put food on their graves and all this stuff and prostrate yourself before little idols too. And if you think this is uncommon, what do you think happens when Islamic martyrs go around town? They're going to put a picture of you up, and they're literally going to put these pictures of you dying as martyrs, or they're going to put a picture of your face up. Oh, he died as a martyr. What happened? He blew himself up. And they're going to put a picture of you up in their town. They'll be like, you're a martyr, and people are going to pay respects to that whenever they see it. That's the beginnings of it in Islam. They're all going to do it, okay? Their martyrs do it. They learn it from the Christians. Okay? Honor your martyrs. The difference is their martyrs are murdering people, and the Christian martyrs are actually dying for their faith. Okay? So, Charlemagne actually is against iconoclasm. But the Franks, starting with Clovis, have figured something out. If these bishops have so much power over these people that if you're trying to overthrow your rival clans and take over everything, and you're a Catholic, these people will come help you. They'll come take care of your wounded on the battlefield. They'll bring you food. They'll give you money because you're defeating their enemies. They're non-Catholic enemies. The bishops have so much power over these people. And so that's why Clovis is going to, basically, he's going to reject Catholic Christianity, and he's going to say, okay, we baptize one of our kids because his wife's a Catholic. He marries a Catholic to appease the Catholics in the area, okay? He's a pagan. His court is full of Arians because he's going to give his sister to the Lombards, and they're Arians. And they're going to get married, and so he's got a court full of Arians. He's a pagan, his wife's a Catholic, okay? And his wife's going to baptize one of their kids, and they're going to die afterwards. And then he's going to baptize another one of their kids, and he's going to get sick and almost die afterwards. And he's going to be like, stop baptizing our kids. This Catholic religion is bullcrap, okay? And then he is going to get into a battle with the Alemanni, which is another Germanic tribe, and he's going to lose. He's going to lose like 3,000 men. And he's just like, this sucks. And then he's going to pray a magic prayer, just like Constantine did, and said, if I win this battle, I'll worship this god. Because that's something these guys would commonly do. If I can win the battle by worshiping your god, I'll worship your god, okay? That's called paganism. That's not called Christianity. And so what does he do? He becomes a Catholic after that, okay? And now he's got the popes on his side. And because he is taking over all of Germany against Arians, they're very happy with that. Because he's ousting the Ostrogoths, he's ousting the Visigoths, they're all Arians. He's ousting the Alamans, they're Arians. He's ousting the Lombards, they're Arians. And they love Clovis's household. Until Charles Martel beats the Muslims. And these whores, the Roman popes, are going to be like, you know, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And they're going to okay Pepin the Short overthrowing the Merovingians. They're going to betray the first Catholic Germans who defeated all the Arians for them. Because now we got a guy who can stop Muslims. And they start giving him the okay, and they crown him Holy Roman. They crown him the Emperor of the Romans. That's what they crown him, okay? Now, the guy who does it is accused of adultery and perjury beforehand. Immediately beforehand. Some people try to beat the crap out of him. Who knows what's true? They're all liars by this time. But they're going to crown him Holy Roman Emperor because they know the Byzantines can't do anything to fight him. And then they're going to have a fight. And they're gonna have a fight. They only get into really one real conflict, but it's mostly a power negotiation over between Croatia, which is in between them, and the Italian cities that the Byzantines still control. Okay, and Charlemagne is basically going to essentially hire the Slavs against him, and these Slavs are going to beat up on Rome, and on Constantinople, and they're going to put a blockade around it so it can't trade. And meanwhile, on the other side of them, they're losing battles to the Arabs. So they agree in exchange for getting Venice back from Constantine to acknowledge him as emperor, but not emperor of the Romans. And that's how this ends. Okay, this is going to be Leo the Armenian, okay? So Leo the Armenian is going to say, okay, Charlemagne, you are the emperor, but not emperor of the Romans, and they're going to get Venice. And that's why later on you're going to have Venetians, and you're going to have, what is the, there's a banking clan, and I'm going to mess this up, so I'm not going to try to overstate this, but there's a banking clan, and I believe they come out of Venice, and they're going to keep rivaling for the papacy. Why? Because they're from the old original Roman Empire. And this new Frankish Roman Empire, they're not for. And they're trying to make Rome great again. Okay? And that's where you're going to get the, it's literally a banking clan, and they're going to keep maneuvering for the papacy throughout the Middle Ages. Okay? Well, Leo the Armenian essentially gives them up, and then he is going to, after he does this, he is going to send himself, it's either him or his predecessor is going to send himself into the monastery. I give up. He's going to abdicate. And then I think it's Michael II is going to, I'm probably getting these guys mixed up. It's going to be right in my book, but I'm just shooting off the cuff right now. Michael II is going to go, okay, we're getting rid of these icons again. And he's going to start up the iconoclasm thing again. Okay? And of course, he's going to do it, and he's going to write to Charlemagne and be like, Charlemagne, dude, we're losing to the Muslims because of the iconoclasm, okay? Charlemagne is fighting Muslims. The Muslims have taken over all of Spain. He's fighting the Muslims. They've taken everything but Western Turkey. And he's like, we're losing because we're idol worshippers. He's literally going to appeal to Charlemagne on that basis. Charlemagne agrees with him, okay? We're losing to the Muslims because we're idol worshippers. Now, these guys are pretty nominal, maybe superstitious Catholics. They're not really born-again Christians, but they are pragmatic, and they do believe in the power of the gods somewhat, okay? They don't really understand the gospel. But they're like, these guys are not worshiping idols. We're worshiping idols. We're losing. They're winning. But then his son's going to take over, and his son's going to die, and his wife is going to reinstitute the idols again. And then they're going to have their the last ecumenical council. Is going to be in 787 before them. That's the one they're going to count as ecumenical. They're not going to count these imperial councils. They're going to say, you didn't have any patriarchs there. And of course, there's just Rome and Constantinople. They do have the Constantinopolitan patriarch there. But they're going to be like, you didn't have Alexander and any of the other ones there. And it's like, well, no, they're overrun by Muslims. We didn't have them there because they're overrun by Muslims. And Rome's basically, what Rome is really saying is you didn't have us there to agree to your iconoclasm, so therefore it's illegit. And that's how the popes are going to start to assert themselves as dominant over the whole church. It's going to start with iconoclasm, And then Leo III, the same guy who crowned Charlemagne, adds to the Nicene Creed, the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. It's a stupid little debate that's based all around Jesus breathing on them and saying, receive the Holy Spirit, even though Jesus says that the Father, he's going to pray to the Father, and the Father will send the Holy Spirit. Okay? It's a stupid little debate over this. It's not about the debate. What it is about is the Roman bishop is going to change the Nicene Creed. The Nicene, Chalcedonian, Constantinopolitan Creed. Basically, the creed that all Christians in the empire have to follow. Okay? He's going to change it. Why? Because he's pulling rank. It has nothing to do with doctrine. The Philoque, anyone who tells you this, it has nothing to do with doctrine whatsoever. What it has to do with is the Alexandria, Antioch, Carthage, Caesarea, and Jerusalem are all in the hands of Muslims now. It's just Constantinople and Rome. And Rome's got the powerful Franks on their side, and Constantinople has nobody. They're losing. They have a tiny little Greek kingdom. They have a couple of islands. They do have like Sicily and Corsica, I think. Okay? They've lost most of their stuff. They've tried to expand and stretch this out a little time, but the Muslims just come back and take it all. Okay? Because they can't hold it. They don't have a power base like they used to have when they controlled the West to project into the East. They basically just have ideal locale, which is why the Turks are going to take that. They love that land. And they control the Bosphorus, and they have access to all the sea trade, and so they can keep their city from being taken over, and they can survive sieges till all get out. But they really can't project power beyond Asia Minor, but beyond Western Turkey, basically. And so the Byzantines are fading. The Romans know that. The Franks, for them, are conquering Europe and literally forcing people to become Christians to maintain their power. They're literally telling these guys that they take over. They're like, either we're going to take you over and put a Christian Catholic in your place, or you can become a Catholic and force your people to be Catholics. From this time, no Europeans are genuine Christians. They're just forced to become Catholics by the sword. Okay? That's what happens once the Franks take over. Because that's how they got their stuff, is by dealing with the popes to overthrow their Merovingian lords, and then dealing with the popes to overthrow their Roman lords. And now that they're running Europe, they're literally just like, okay, what's good for the pope is what's good for us. And this partnership between the Franks and the popes is going to go on and on and on, even though they have all this fighting for centuries. And it's going to go on and on and on until the Germans are like, you know what? We're all subservient to the Italians. This is bullcrap. And that's where you're going to get your Reformation. Okay? But these guys, back then, are like, we're all idolaters. They're calling themselves out. We are all idolaters. We bow down and worship idols. Adoring icons is just another way of saying worship idols. Okay? They're going to call it out. They worship Mary. It's an effeminate religion. And Islam's going to show up and be like, it is an effeminate religion. You fags need to go. And we're taking over now. And they're going to take over everything. Everything from France to India. They literally have basically the Carthaginian Empire, the Greek Empire, and the Persian Empire all in one. Okay? They have everything but Western Rome. Now, contrary to what great refined scholars like Joel Richardson have to say, they're not in Daniel's 4 beasts, okay? Because the Mongols are going to show up and have an even bigger empire than them. What they are, what the Mongols and the Muslims are Assyria and Babylon, kicking the crap out of Israel because they're a bunch of idolaters. That's literally what's going on. And so you're going to have the Mongols rise up, and they're going to take over everything from China to Poland. And then you have the Muslims taking everything over from Spain to India. And then you're going to have basically the Frankish Holy Roman Empire, which is constantly fighting amongst itself. Taking over Western Europe. But because they're constantly fighting among themselves, while these other empires pretty much have peace and control, 2 great powers are going to come out of that. One is going to be three in time, but originally it's going to be 2. The French and the Russians. Because the Russians are like, you guys are getting kind of soft. And the French are just going to be like, yep, keep on taking over, keep on taking over, keep on taking over, keep on fighting. They're going to fight with England back and forth and keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And eventually the French are just going to sack the popes and be like, we're in charge now, biatch. And the popes are going to bend over and take it and say, thank you, sir, may I please have another? And that's essentially going to be your warm-up to the Reformation. I mean, that's how you get to your Dark Ages. And because the popes have these rules, the churches have these rules forever that you can't just go leave the church and go to this other see, well, that's where serfdom comes from. Because it's not it's not the Franks who are saying you're basically our slaves and you can't leave this land and go to another land. It's bishops saying it. The bishops are the one who have the people convinced that you can't go anywhere. You just work your land, pay to your lords, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? And then give to us your tithes. And so they're given all their money. These people are working for bare subsistence, and they're giving all their extra money. Well, they're like covered in crap and wearing sackcloth, and they're giving all their extra money to either the German lords or the bishops, who are rich and ruling everything. And it's going to last for 1,000 years until these guys start to fight between themselves. It's awful. It's so ugly. Like, church history, I'm reading so much of the stuff, and the only thing I can see is this is so ugly. The best people you can find are literally just sincerely, deeply, deeply, deeply deceived. This is nothing of Christ. So that the question you want to ask is then, why is Philip Schaff and these guys defending Origen? Why are these guys trying to say that Porphyry is clearly mistaken? I know he's talking about Origen of Alexandria and Ammonius of Alexandria, but there's another Ammonius of Alexandria who is also at the same time as another Origen of Alexandria spreading around Christian stuff, not Neoplatonism. It just coincidentally happens that Origen comes out with a very Neoplatonic systematic theology within a decade of this. Just a coincidence, though. Why are they falling for this crap? And the answer is they're not falling for it. They're the heirs of it. The answer is because Philip Schaff is a Calvinist. And Calvinists are all about winning and maintaining their Gnostic secret mystery cult. They are a Gnostic secret mystery cult, okay? The majority are dupes. Many, I'm sure, are sincere Christians, but the guys at the core of this thing are a Gnostic mystery cult. They know what they're doing. They have been overthrowing governments since the Reformation. They have been overthrowing governments, murdering people, enslaving people, taking over the world, and plotting global dominance for centuries, for 500 years. And yes, on the surface, they're just people who want to argue over Romans 9 because they just say, Jacob I love and Esau I hated. But underneath, they are very astute religious propagandists who know what scriptures to use over and over and over again and know what scriptures to never touch with a 10-foot pole. That's what they do, and that's what they train their followers to do, just like the Origenists, just like the Clementines. Because at the end of this, the battle between free will and fate, which is what Calvinism is, has nothing to do with free will and fate. It has to do with their impassible, stoic monad. Okay? Listen to me. Called providence. And if you know who that is, it's this guy. The eye of providence you're going to find popping up in the early church stuff. I found it and I lost it. I'm sorry, but I did find it. I think it was in Clement. This eye of providence, this eye of Pythagoras is like the guy who gave us the triangle math, okay? And he got it from the Egyptians. And his monad, the all-seeing eye of providence that governs fate, okay? This is all Greek philosophy. This is all Greek philosophy, okay? Announcing the birth of the New World Order. What do you think this is? If it's the New World Order, why is it a pyramid with a very old false god on it? And the answer is because this is the monad. The monad's at the top of the triangle, and beneath him is the duad. Okay, and their duad has a bunch of different forms. It's either bisexual sun, that they're pedophiling, or he's an androgynous male-female like their Baphomet. That's the duad. And the monad, which is fate, is controlling everything. It's the all-seeing eye of providence. And what providence was to these guys is somebody who sees every possible decision that everyone's going to have from eternity past and then wires all reality to make all those your free will decisions work in line with his divine providence. Okay? In other words, you have the illusion of free will, but you don't. That's the point. Fate is controlling everything. And know who this is right here? Lucifer. It's Satan. I'm telling you, they worship Satan. They worship Satan in a form many of them don't know they do. Because when you go join the Freemasons, they don't tell you you're going to worship Satan when you join there. They tell you, oh yeah, we got a King James Bible right here. We're just a do-gooders club. We're like the Elks Club, the Elks Lodge, whatever. We got funny hats and weird handshakes and stuff like that, but there's a King James Bible right there because we're Christians. We're good old Christians. And you have towns in America. I have lost my car to a town where the Freemason center is the courthouse. And these guys are a whole town full of liars and tricksters. And if you happen upon that town, they're going to get your car and they're going to take it. They're poor, they're dumb, but they're good at this crap. Lying, conniving, using the laws to get what they want. Okay? That's what they're good at. I've had run-ins with these guys in the South. They're all over America. They're evil. But it started with Clement and Origen. Now, it didn't even start with them. It started with Tatian and Justin Martyr. And Ignatius, if you really want to get into it, who came up with bishops in the first real pyramid scheme to ever hit the church, which is the bishops are over the elders. That's a pyramid. That's a hierarchy. That's Pythagorean. We don't do triangles and pyramids. Okay? Well, what about a God that's a triangle? No, we don't do triangles and pyramids. But what about a God that's a triangle and the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are all part of the triangle? It's like a flux capacitor. It's like an upside down triangle. How about an upside down triangle? Is that okay? No, dude, that's not okay because we're not fans of upside down triangles, dude. So you don't like right side up triangles or upside down triangles? No. What about triangled knots that come from Celtic paganism? No, we don't want triangles. Rainbow colored triangles? Nope, we don't want that either. What about gold and silver triangle? That just looks like a triangle with a snake wrapped into it. So no. What about a flux capacitor, though? A flux capacitor. It's the ultimate triangle. It's what makes time travel possible. No triangles. Our God is not a triangle. Our God is not a bird and a Jedi and a Padawan. It's not a bird and a Jedi and a Padawan. It's not a Jedi, a Padawan, and a Force. I kid you not. This is what Tatian and these guys believe. It's not a Jedi, a Padawan, and a Force. You guys need to watch your Star Wars with new, opened, watch the Gnosticism and your Christianity eyes, because the good guys were celibates with Padawans who used the Force. That's their version of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, except his real father, apparently, that caused him to be immaculately conceived, was Palpatine. Father, Son, and the Force is the Holy Spirit. Okay? This is false Christianity. That's what it is, and that's why you literally have, like, the Presbyterian Church of the Label looks like Boba Fett. Why? Because the Mandalorians say this is the way. They believe in baptismal regeneration. They just explain it differently. They do get married. They have kids. And they fight against Jedis and Sith. What are Jedis and Sith, you ask? Oh, that's easy. That's the Orthodox and the Catholics. Ready? Your Mandalorians are your Presbyterians, your Orthodox are your Jedis, and your Catholics are your Sith. And Catholics have secret love affairs, and Orthodox are really, really gay. That's what it is, you guys. The world is not what it seems. And I'm not telling you this out of like some weird conspiratorial speculation. I'm telling you, your scholars, your seminaries are populated with liars. They have this information. It's public information. They know about this. They just cover it up. And why do your seminaries cover it up? Why are they so intent? Origen has been declared a heretic. Origen has been outed half a dozen times over 200 years before he was finally declared a heretic, a universalist. Why are your scholars at your seminaries calling Origen a great Christian theologian? Why are they going back to eyes wide shutting you guys in relation to Origen? And the answer is because Origen is the father of textual criticism. And they love textual criticism because that's what allows them to change the Bibles and make them more Calvinist. That's why. You're going to find all kinds of Calvinists who are all kinds of interested in textual criticism. Why? Because they're all kinds of interested in changing the Bible and gradually, slowly making it more Calvinist. Why? Because textual criticism is not a hard science. It's loaded with bias. Yes, there's some scientific methodology in it that shows what was written in the originals, but they don't know what's authorized changes that would have happened underneath the Apostle John, or what's changes that could have happened under the heretic Origen. And then they're going to go back and they're going to rest on this Alexandrian text. Now, mind you, I just showed you the Alexandrians were all Gnostics by the time you get to Nicaea. And they're going to come up with the Alexandrian manuscripts, which is going to be your Textus Vaticanus, and it's going to be your Textus Sinaiticus. Never mind the whole sketchy story that goes into the Sinaiticus being found and mysteriously matching only the Vatican by a guy who just got done studying the Vaticanus and just got done translating the second oldest copy of the Bible, and he mysteriously shows up and just happens to find in a trash can the oldest copy of the Bible that only matches the Vaticanus. I'm calling. I think the Sinaiticus is a forgery. I think they know it's a forgery, and that's why they don't do carbon dating testing on it. They don't do materials testing on it. I think they know it is an 18th century forgery because that forgery happens to overthrow the Catholics as having the oldest original Bible. And it also happens to give the room for the Germans and the textual critics and Westcott and Hort and all these idiots who are definitely occultists to basically give you a new translation of the Bible that they can systematically, gradually change over time, over decades, over centuries, because they think this is going to last forever. They don't think Jesus is coming back anytime soon. And they can, over centuries, gradually, through textual criticism, change the Bible to be full-blown Calvinism. Why? Because Calvinism is Stoicism. That's why. It's Stoic Platonic philosophy, period. That's what it is. It's Gnosticism. And if they can slowly change the Bible over hundreds of years, they can prove to you through Scripture that Gnosticism and Christianity are one and the same. Because they were always under the power of fake Christians who were pushing Neoplatonism secretly, knowing they were not Christians, secretly pushing it in all throughout the Orthodox Church. Okay? Need you guys to hear this. Need you guys to call Orthodox, Calvinist, Catholic, all of them, okay? Remember, 3 loaves a meal, all 3 are leavened. That is a parable. That is a prophecy of Jesus Christ. 3 loaves a meal, that's 3 distinct communions, all leavened. And they're claiming, those 3 claim to be the authorities over what the rest of the church thinks. And it's all based on these 7 ecumenical councils, which they all agree on. These 7 ecumenical councils, when you get my book, Rightly Dividing, I'm going to show you that every single one of them was a charade. Every single one of them was biblically untrue. The doctrines in them were biblically untrue. Not one of them espoused real Christian teaching. They were fake, they were charades, and they were only about advancing the power of the hierarchy. Okay? So I hope you guys take this to heart. Remember, do your research. Try Zotero out if you're a researcher. Connect me with other people who are good researchers. You guys be blessed. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.